Hello there, it's 6 o'clock, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got you talking today. Now, when it comes to the next pandemic, who should be responsible for defining and implementing our country's response? Is it us as a sovereign country, or is it the World Health Organization? Many people are concerned about what might be coming next. We'll be looking at that. And many people in the world of football have gotten themselves in a bit of a tiz-was over a player who refused to wear rainbow markings on his back. Now, allegations of homophobia and God only knows what seem to be running rife, but hang on a second, there's a couple of things going on in my mind right now about this. Number one, how can we here in the West claim to be culturally diverse and tolerant and all the rest of it, but heaven forbid you are diverse in your thinking? And why are we having these kind of campaigns that everybody must get behind, or else? I want to look into that as well. And Iceland, the shop, not the place, are offering 10% discount to the over 60s once a week. What do you think to this? Is this going to be the start of things to come? Businesses chipping in, helping out. Do you think we'll be seeing more of it? Or should businesses just be getting on and doing business? We'll have all that to come. Thanks for that. Well, keeping me company until 7 o'clock tonight. Here's my panel. We've got former advisor to Boris Johnson and now Conservative life peer Lord Moylan, journalist and broadcaster Nabila Ramdani, and Alistair Donald, who's the Associate Director at the Academy of Ideas. Good afternoon, you three. Good afternoon. Good evening. What do we say now? It's about almost evening time, isn't it? Daniel, I always say the same thing to you. Whenever the news headlines are on, I'm going to try and create some kind of spin-off show because you are hilarious. I just love your commentary on all of the news headlines. I wish you could hear him, ladies and gentlemen. He's very funny. He does. He's just kind of muttering away, criticising this person, criticising that story. I love it. Anyway, you know the drill on Dewbs & Co, don't you? It's not just about us here and our thoughts. It's about you at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? You can get in touch with me on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GB News. Don't forget, if you haven't already, you can subscribe to us on YouTube. You might even be watching us there right now. If you are, good evening to you. You can listen to us, ladies and gentlemen, on the radio. DAB+, you see, we're all high-tech, we're swanky, we're pretty much everywhere. So good evening to you, wherever you are watching or listening tonight. You are very, very welcome. Now, on Monday, the World Health Organization meets in Switzerland to discuss what some are saying might end up as a legal framework for how different countries in the world deal with a pandemic. Lots of people are quite anxious about all of this. Stop the treaty is been trending, for example, on social media. Lots of people are saying, whoa there, this is apparently the first step in us, the UK, handing over our sovereign rights in terms of determining how we deal with a pandemic to the World Health Organization. Well, joining me now is Dr. Will Jones from the Daily Skeptic. He's been writing about this. Good evening to you. Let me start by asking you, just give the viewers a summary, if you will, a brief summary on what's happening at the moment.
So the World Health Assembly, which is the governing body of the World Health Organization, is meeting next week, as you said, in Geneva. And at that meeting, they're going to discuss what they need to do next to take forward this agenda for... the Director General is calling it a pandemic accord. They seem to have backed off a little bit from the language of treaty. They talk about an instrument as well. So it's not entirely clear at the moment what exactly it's going to have in it, look like, what it's going to be. But there's definitely an agenda to take something forward to have stronger pandemic preparedness and response at an international level. And so there's so the governments have been calling for this. Last December, a survey was sent out by the World Health Organization to all the member states and stakeholders and to ask them their views on 131 recommendations, yes, 131, that had been made by various committees of the World Health Organization, various member states, and they've had feedback from that. A report from the working group has put forward their views on that, and that is going, and it's that document, the working group's report on the 131 recommendations, that's going to the World Health Assembly next week.
And where do you stand on this? Because there are an awful lot of people concerned. In fact, there's a petition running as we speak with 136,717 signatures, to be precise, as it stands right now, saying we do not sign, it's addressed to the government, obviously, do not sign any World Health Organization pandemic treaty unless it is approved via public referendum. Do you think people have got a point here? Because there's a real concern at the moment that the kind of unelected WHO will start trying to dictate to sovereign countries like the UK, you know, this is what you're going to be doing. So if the fact that can we leave our house or not within lockdown, vaccine policies, mandation of vaccines, all that kind of stuff potentially will be coming from the WHO. People are concerned about that. Are they right?
Sajid Javid said yesterday that put out statements making clear that the UK does not intend in any way to compromise its sovereignty, and other countries have said similar. And my view is that it's most unlikely that a new treaty or instrument or accord will, in that way, in that direct way, impinge on a state's right to decide for itself its response. However, and this is the big however, there is the World Health Organization will be, and the plan is to greatly strengthen the international framework to have far more people employed working there, more surveillance, more joined up working, and more, there's a plan to set up a compliance committee to look at what states are doing and to dictate to them how they should change. Now that won't be binding on them. But it will clearly that will create a strong pressure if the World Health Organization starts telling them what they should have. And also, there's a huge amount more funding that's being proposed, and that funding is proposed to be tied to the compliance. So,
and I'm going to bring my panel in just a second. But just before I do that, I mean, some of the reading up that I've been doing on this, and I do need to be clear that we're all a little bit in the dark at the moment, but nonetheless, there's a lots of kind of stuff online that's available to read in terms of sentiments. Lots of articles have been written from places like the BMJ and a variety of different sources. And I think that there are concerns, certainly around people, and I've just mentioned that petition there, that, for example, this is going to be a legally binding framework. Good behaviour will be kind of rewarded, bad behaviour will be sanctioned, etc. It is all alarming. It alarms me. Daniel, does it alarm you?
I'm deeply worried, and I think Dr. Jones has laid it out quite helpfully, but there are even deeper concerns. The first question is why the World Health Organization at all? This is an organization that we can't trust. We know that it is excessively close to China, and we know that it is also very close to big pharma. It takes lots of money from foundations which are connected to various interests and so on. And really it lost its credibility. So I would absolutely not want to put responsibility for future policy in the hands of the World Health Organization as it currently stands. That's the first thing. The second thing is its thinking is clearly moving in the direction, welcomed by China, that the right response to a pandemic is lockdown. Now, I actually think lockdown was a disaster. I think the government, when they made that choice, they didn't know quite what to do. I think there was a case for doing it at the time, but I think we know from experience it was the wrong choice. And any idea the World Health Organization could be shifting us in that direction is highly unwelcome. And the final thing is that one of the things they're going to do is talk about prevention. Now, we don't know how this pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, started because China won't collaborate in helping us find out. But one of the possibilities is it started out in a laboratory in Wuhan. And if it did start out in a laboratory in Wuhan, then that was almost certainly as a result of an international effort to try and prevent such viruses getting out into the public again. So why would you go back and say, we're going to have a policy on prevention when you still haven't worked out and been honest about whether prevention, trying to prevent it, was actually the problem in the first place?
Indeed.
You've got to know how to do prevention properly. If they did it wrong, we've got to know why.
Nabila, when Daniel was just talking then and he was saying about trusting the WHO, I saw your eyebrows shoot up. Why?
Well, first of all, I have to say that it's the number one duty of any government, national government, to save lives. And this is not exclusive from global organizations like the World Health Organization also stepping in, especially when we're dealing with global phenomenon like a global pandemic. So it's only right that we get our acts together globally and coordinate action to deal with such unprecedented times as we've seen through the pandemic. I think we used to think that issues were, were specific to communities or geographical areas, but the global pandemic has shown that it's not like that. You know, we all have to deal with certain issues at a certain time. And I think in principle, it is worth having an organization like the WHO, because wherever you are in the world, you have pretty much the same needs nowadays. And we need a coordinated approach to deal with global problems. And if anything, the pandemic has shown all that.
So you think whether or not I leave my house should be dictated by the World Health Organization currently in Geneva?
No, what I'm saying is, first start, I'm saying the World Health Organization has flaws. It's not perfect, and I'm not utopian, I'm not an idealist per se, but I personally think it's unfair now to crow about early failings with hindsight, which is a wonderful thing, as we know. We can easily now pontificate about the early failings and what we should have done and maybe avoid lockdowns and the rest of it. But nobody had a clue when the pandemic broke out. And the development of all societies is in the end about trial and error. And the pandemic was a classic example of that. And now the WHO is trying to consolidate what's happened. And yes, there will always be criticism about management, especially because health issues are hugely political. And dare I say, pan-national organizations need, in my opinion, technocrats. That is to say, people using technology to solve global problems. And again, the difficulty is when people try to use such organizations for political reasons. But I think we can try to deal with that with more scrutiny. And the great irony, of course, is that if the more democratic you become, in fact, with an organization like the World Health Organization, then the more political it in fact becomes. So what you really need is the best medics in the world, the best administrators to coordinate policies.
And no democracy.
Heavily overseen by funders like Bill Gates, for example, private funders. Let me just bring Alistair in. Alistair, where do you stand on some of this?
Well, obviously, having been through a major pandemic, it makes a lot of sense for researchers and experts to come together and review what's going on. Whether the WHO is the forum under which to do that is questionable, and I share many of Daniel's concerns about the WHO, both in terms of the way it operates and also the political sensitivities and interactions around it over things like China as such. But I do tend to think that Will got the balance right in his introduction, being a bit circumspect about the extent to which this involves, as Russell Brand said, the end of democracy. I think that stretches it too far. And there is a kind of conspiratorial air in terms of the way that we see WHO just now, which I think energies and efforts might be better concentrated on looking at actually what's gone on in the UK over the last 2 years. Because when you talk about the influence of technocracy and the lack of the public's involvement in decisions, that has been because Parliament has overridden many of the public's concerns and introduced lockdowns and so on and so forth. So I think there's, as with all treaties, there's an element of pressure that's exerted in terms of the way that a nation works. But also, I think it's fair to say that treaties are often put in place by global organisations full of technocratic experts, as you say, but many of those concerns are shared by our domestic politicians, and treaties can be a convenient way of our domestic politicians implementing things that they already want to do, hiding behind the cover of a treaty. And I think we just need to kind of realise that it's not just the WHO, but there's a domestic set of concerns and considerations that we need to take into account.
Yeah, and Paul's just emailed in saying, this all sounds like an excuse for the conspiracy theorists to lose their rag again. Well, I tell you, Paul, I've got to admit, it does sound a little bit suspicious to me, some of this, when you actually start digging into it. It does actually make me uncomfortable. Bernard says on the email, we're only just getting away from one lot of idiotic leaders in the EU, his words, not mine. We don't want Another load of idiotic so-called leaders telling us what to do. Again, Stuart says, I've got great difficulty adhering to what our politicians tell us, so I've got no chance at all of adhering to what someone else says when they're coming. I think he means from the WHO. Let me just ask you this. I mentioned at the start about the petition. So lots of people are saying that actually, if you want to enforce an international treaty from the WHO on us as a country in terms of the response to the pandemic will be governed, dictated to and managed by a third party, the WHO, we should have a referendum. Do you think we should?
I think so. It's important for us to remember that we weren't forced to impose a lockdown or any of the 3 lockdowns that we've had. That we chose to do that, and there was a popular. I mean the government chose to do that, and that was a popular policy. So the risk of putting it to I mean, I'm all in favour of democracy and referendum, but the risk is that the public would just support this. I think
no, because they're 2 different things. You wouldn't go to the referendum. You wouldn't go to a referendum saying, "Do you support lockdowns?" You'd go to the referendum saying, when it comes to a global pandemic, do you want to be governed by the policy of the World Health Organization, or do you want to be governed by the policy of the UK government? That would be the question.
I think we could put it to the public, and I think that would be helpful. But really, we should just not be. And the government has said they don't intend to sign up to a treaty that will surrender their sovereignty. But I think that the bigger issue.
Come on, the government also turned around and said things like there'll be no vaccine passports. There was vaccine passports. There'll be no mandatory vaccinations. There were then mandatory vaccinations when it came to employment. The government said an awful lot of things and then very quickly backtracked as the scenario has gone on. So, and that's coming through thick and fast on the email as well. People are saying, "Great." You're saying, Sajid Javid, saying that this is not going to happen. But they've got quite a strong track record of saying something's not going to happen and then it happening.
Absolutely, and I think the big issue here, if I can say, is something that's actually already happening at the international level, which is that really this is the big concern is that this is a push to lock in lockdowns, if you like, to make lockdowns mandatory, masking, closure of schools, all these things that we've got used to, rushing through vaccines, that kind of thing. The push is to make these things permanent and to make them the standard normal response. And the fact is that the World Health Organization says it's already doing that, and it says that it's changed. And this is one of the big things that people haven't appreciated, is that the World Health Organization says it's already changed its definition of what pandemic preparedness is all about, and it says that it's now about curbing transmission of a pandemic virus. Now we've got used to that over the last 2 years. That we think, that's what we should be trying to do, but we don't realise that is a radical and major change to how we think we should respond. We had a plan. People say that we didn't have a plan in February, March 2020, but we had a pandemic preparedness plan that we'd made in 2011 based on World Health Organization advice. It was good advice at the time, and the government was clear that we will not close borders, we will not stop mass gatherings in any pandemic, and that masks are not effective, and we will not be imposing masks. It said all these things, and we had a plan. The problem wasn't that we didn't have a plan. The problem wasn't that we didn't follow World Health Organization advice. It's that we just threw it out the window, along with the World Health Organization throwing it out the window. As soon as China locked down, suddenly the World Health Organization was going around the world telling people that this was the way to respond to pandemics. This was a completely new, novel and extreme idea. And the problem we've got now is that the World Health Organization has already, and we can see that in one of the recommendations they're putting to the World Health Assembly next week, that they've changed the aim of pandemic preparedness. They say it's to curb transmission, and they say that's going to be the benchmark. That's what they are going to be telling states, and what states should be putting into their plans going forward. And they said that work is already underway. They don't need a new treaty. They don't even need to amend an existing treaty. They say they're already doing that. And this is to my mind, this is the big issue that people are not appreciating, because we're getting distracted, I think, by the threat to democracy from handing over sovereignty and all of that, and not realising that the shift is going on ideologically in what is the aim of in responding to a pandemic, and that will lock in lockdowns into our plans and our preparation, and that's what we really have to stop.
Yes, and I think the point is not about whether we're capitulating as national governments to the World Health Organization, or whether it's about, them telling us what to do. Or I think it's, as you highlighted, it's about introducing standard procedures and standardization of coordination, including in transport, in distribution, involving the best technocrats around. It's about a practical solution to a huge global problem.
I was going to move on, but very briefly, because Daniel's shaking his head. Daniel, what's the matter?
I think the problem is it isn't a practical solution. Underlying it all are big ideological questions about how you deal with people in a democracy. And if you want the sort of solution they've got in Shanghai now, where people are locked up, then that is something that the World Health Organization is encouraging you to do. I mean, preparedness, preparing to stop transmission, for example. A good example of that would be if we all now, ahead of the next pandemic, start building fences around housing estates with big gates in them, just like you have in China, so that we're prepared to stop transmission by locking people inside their estates and passing food through a hole in the wall. Because that's what happens in China. That's the sort of thing we could be doing to prepare for it if we followed that. That's not the right approach at all. We have to be firm in saying lockdowns didn't work. Lockdowns are not the answer.
Yes.
The answer lies in developing
but they had to be tried
therapeutic
and tested
solutions.
before we could draw the conclusion that they didn't work out, and we're still trying to assess whether they worked out or not.
The worry with my big worry with with what's being proposed now is that they want to set up a global health council of heads of state, and the problem with this is they seem to be wanting to put the World Health Organization and the world on a permanent emergency footing.
Well, you've just tapped on something there. David on Twitter says, Michelle, I'm personally waiting for the mainstream media to go into overdrive regarding monkeypox. Well, unfortunately, David, something tells me you're not going to have that long to wait. Anyway, Dr. Will Jones, thank you very much for your time, your insight there. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to you. Have you seen the kind of the hysteria, I would basically call it, in the world of football at the moment, because a player dared, ladies and gentlemen, he dared to sit out a match because he didn't want to wear a football shirt with a rainbow on his back to celebrate championing LGBTQ+I rights, etc. Many people are furious and demanding that he comes out and apologises and poses for a picture with the shirt and all the rest of it. And I'm asking this, look, we champion diversity all the time, don't we? But don't you think that diversity of thought should also be welcome? Or are we asking for trouble? Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. Keeping me company tonight, former advisor to Boris Johnson and now Conservative life payer, Lord Moylan, journalist and broadcaster Nabila Ramdani. I know your name, I don't know why I mixed it up then, and Alistair Donald, who's the Associate Director at the Academy of Ideas. Lots of response coming in, I can tell you, about the World Health Organization. A common theme here is that many people seem to have lost trust in various organisations throughout COVID. Are you one of them? Get in touch, let me know. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Many of you are saying this sounds to me like something to be suspicious of. Other people saying it sounds like a sensible idea. Why would you not have a coordinated response to a pandemic as opposed to individual countries doing whatever on earth they want to do? Keep your thoughts coming in. Let me know what you're thinking about that topic tonight. But let's move on now. Right, Paris Saint-Germain footballer Idriss Gueye decided to sit out on a match rather than wear a shirt that had the numbers picked out on the back in a rainbow design. The rainbow was to support basically the International Day against homophobia, transphobia and biphobia. But Idrissa is a practising Muslim and comes from Senegal, where the majority there believe that homosexuality is unacceptable. Now, to be clear, Idrissa has not spoken on homosexuality at all, but he's facing calls for punishment because he didn't want to wear this shirt. It got me thinking, by the way, because, I mean, I'll read out some of the response and reaction to this, and I think it's a little bit intense. And we talk, don't we, all the time about diversity. We'll say that we've got a diverse country. We celebrate diversity. It's something to welcome and champion. But what about diversity of thought? And when we have these campaigns, I mean, we have all different campaigns these days, don't we? We're talking about Black Lives Matter, for example, a couple of days ago on this show. This time we're talking about this particular campaign, rainbow laces you have in football, don't you? Rainbow this, rainbow that. should you be allowed to sit it out? And if you do sit it out, does that mean that you are racist, homophobic, whatever it is? Or does it mean that you just want to maybe, I don't know, keep your views to yourself, or perhaps not be seen to be championing this or championing that? Nabila, where do you stand on all of this?
Well, first of all, you know, as you mentioned, Idrissa is a football player, and we often, you know, sport is by definition about conformity. It's about sticking to rules, working as a team, and it's about trying the best to be the best as you can in a clearly defined discipline. But there's no reason why this conformity should extend beyond the actual sport, not least of all to politics. And the general rule of sport, it has nothing to do with politics. So I'm a bit baffled as to why, you know, we should expect sportsmen to express political views at any opportunity unless, you know, we are caught in an extreme situation. And so we're seeing more and more sports people getting involved in anti-apartheid movement, for example, showing opposition to a war. I mean, all that is fine, but I think we now bizarrely...
Hang on, why is all that fine? And then you're saying this isn't fine. What's the difference? Where's your line?
No, I'm saying it's up to the individual to make up their mind whether they want to show support for a cause or indeed sit on it. You know, sportsmen are not politicians. They are not public political figures, and they shouldn't be judged as such. And, you know, I'm all for judging people on how they behave within the law, and if the laws are broken, for example, then people should be castigated or indeed punished. But in this case, it hasn't happened. He hasn't broken any law. In fact, and his religion has nothing to do with the problem, I would contend. I think...
You don't think his religion, the fact that in his religion homosexuality isn't accepted, you don't think that played a part in the fact that he didn't want to wear that rainbow shirt?
Well, you know, I don't want to defend or indeed criticise his views, because I don't think a footballer is in any way a political figure. But you see in the Premier League, for example, there are lots of Muslim footballers, superstar footballers in the game nowadays. Most of them have very liberal views, and it's a good thing. It doesn't matter what religion you are, or indeed, if you don't have a religion, there will always be extreme social views around. But I think, again, I go back to the boundary of the law. For example, we saw that the Christian hotel owners prevented homosexuals from staying in their hotels, and they were rightly punished by the law. This is not a case of breaking the law.
Right, Alistair, I want to bring you in. Before I do, I just want to read, I've got a clip, I think I'll put it on the screen as well. So the French Football Federation have written a letter, ladies and gentlemen, to the player, saying a variety of different things, by the way. It starts off, I'm showing you a portion of it on the screen. I'm just going to read you the start of it before I get to the screen bit. There are two possibilities, this is to the footballer. Either these allegations are unfounded, and we therefore invite you to speak out without delay to silence these rumours. For example, we invite you to accompany your message by a photo of yourself wearing the said shirt. Or the rumours are true, and in this case, we invite you to realise the impact of your act and the grave error committed. The fight against discrimination towards different minorities, whoever they might be, is a vital fight for all our times, whether it's skin colour, religion, sexual orientation or any other difference. All discrimination is based on the same principle, which is the rejection of the other because they are different from the majority. See, I read that, Alistair. If someone wrote me a letter like that saying, you know, you better come out and defend yourself, and while you're at it, you can hold up your shirt and give me a picture, well, I can't tell you what I'd say to them because it's tea time. Where do you stand on it?
Well, it is worth making the point that this story has come out in the same week as the young Blackpool footballer Jack Daniels has come out as gay and received widespread praise for his move. Even the Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp said in the aftermath of the one of the main events of British football, the FA Cup final the other week, that he congratulated him, and there's been a lot of positive sentiment about that. So there might not be many young gay footballers that are out, as it were, but there's certainly been a positive sentiment to them, to this guy coming out. So that, given that context, it's even more, you know, it's interesting that there's been such a fuss over this story. I personally, I don't agree with what Guy says. and the people that support him. But I think it's been a long-standing principle in all walks of life that you have the freedom to form your own beliefs, and you should have the capacity to express those beliefs. And it seems to me that that's been stripped away in the context of football and many other sports just now, because sport has become the main arena for the expression of these diversity policies. The capacity of people to express what they believe has been very much cut back. And it's interesting that when he did it a year ago, and he didn't announce, he hasn't announced it this time,
No,
it's
I know.
worth remembering, but he said he was ill a year ago. Now, it's a pretty terrible situation if you've got to feign illness in order to take the action that you want, because you cannot openly express what you believe in. So I think this is a real problem. It's part of a shift towards a society that is compelling people to say what others think they should say, rather than have the freedom to express their own beliefs. And that's the route down not a good road.
Daniel Moylan, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, just to say we don't have a slave economy, and if someone doesn't want to work, they can't be made to work. Of course, they might have their pay docked for not turning up to work. That's what we'd all expect, but these are his choices. The second thing is, what really interests me about this, and Alistair was getting onto this, is how football in particular, but other sports too, but particularly football, has become a means of social control. So that the people who value this idea of nudge, you know, that you can nudge people into behaving in the way you want them to, must be thrilled to have access now, to have almost complete control over what happens on the football field. Not the match itself. The match itself's another matter. But all the paraphernalia, all the surrounding stuff is now being aggressively used in order to get the crowds in the stadium and the wider audience in the country and even globally to behave in certain ways, to adopt certain views. And who is behind all of this? Who is exercising this control? How is it decided? All of those questions, I think, are really much more interesting than whether one particular player turns up, because it's having an immense impact on people and what they feel they can say and do.
And dare I say, I mean, Idrissa Gueye has clearly very strong views about homosexuality. He's clearly very conservative. But we only know that because he's been forced to express a political view, basically, by his club. And he shouldn't have been put in that position in the first place. And I agree with Alistair. I think the issue here is not what your views on a certain subject is, but whether you should be forced to take position in the public domain. Many people in life decide to have a conciliatory and indeed diplomatic approach to a lot of things. That's why we have the expression, not discuss religion or indeed politics. And I would contend that that should apply to sportsmen. They shouldn't be forced to take political views. They have chosen to play sport, not to go into politics. If they break the law, it's another matter altogether. But I think, you know, I've noticed recently that some footballers have opposed, for example, taking the knee before games because they object to the Black Lives Matters organisation. And this follows claims that the BLM organisation is a Marxist one, and indeed it's a deeply political one, and they don't want particularly to be involved in politics. And I think the main thing here in general, I think sport should be a distraction from all the angst and horror of real life. It shouldn't be a platform to express political views as a matter of fact.
Yeah, and I don't like this whole kind of, right, today, football, we've decided that you better kneel. So you're going to prove to people that you're not racist by kneeling. Right, OK. And then if someone decides they don't want to kneel, then there is people out there, a lot of people lambasting these people, go, he's racist, he must be racist because he's not kneeling. And then it's kind of like, now what you've got to do is now you've got to wear rainbow laces or rainbow things on your back. And if you don't, then you are a homosexual and you better... Is that the word? No, not homosexual. What's homophobe? Thank you. If you are a homophobe, and then you've got to come out and prove. I wouldn't accept someone telling me, Michelle, you've got to do this to prove this. So, Michelle, you've got to make your Instagram black, or Michelle, you've got to wear this pin badge. I wouldn't accept someone telling me that. I will kind of choose what I think and what I don't think. I won't be told to demonstrate my thoughts with a particular symbol. You're trying to come back in, Alistair.
Well, I think what's very striking with both this and with the taking the knee situation that you mentioned is that what started years, decades ago, as very, very positive movements for liberation, gay liberation, black people's freedom, has arrived today at a situation where, in the name of those movements of progress, we're actually being told to constrain what we say and what we think and how we act. So these movements, somewhere along the way, have gone in a very wrong direction into compelling people what to think, rather than fighting for people's freedom to believe and act as they want to.
Yes, we go back to the issue of conformity that I've raised. Again, Idrissa, like other players, they are paid to be a conformist at their sport. They're not there to have personal view that conform with everybody else's.
And what I found fascinating, Daniel, is because there's an interesting scenario about to occur. So the World Cup is going to be performed in Qatar. Now, a lot of people are saying that this is wrong because obviously their view in Qatar about homosexuality versus the Westerners' view, they're worlds apart, they're poles apart. And people are kind of highlighting that and saying, well, you know, there's a culture clash, there's a religious clash. So there will be a certain religion that, for example, says that homosexuality is wrong. Then there will be the Western values, which say actually it's perfectly acceptable. Whose value set, therefore, takes precedent?
Well,
because I think what we do as Western...
None of those values are actually embedded in the rules of association football.
Precisely.
Why don't they play football according to the rule book? They've got a rule book.
And keep all of this stuff out of there.
Well, I mean, you want to put all of this stuff into it. If people want to put all of this stuff into it, then you can have a right row. That's great. And then people will boycott, other people won't go. They're perfectly entitled to boycott. As I say, we don't have a slave economy. People don't have to go and play football. They don't have to go and attend matches or pay to buy tickets. I'm perfectly happy if people at a personal level want to say, I don't want to go, I don't want to be part of that, I don't want to watch it on the television. But the purpose of the whole thing is to play football according to a rule book that is essentially free of those values, which is, as Nabila says, is essentially you conform to the rules and that's your valid way of playing.
Well, let me know what you think. Simon says, politics and football is an awful mix. I've got to say, I think lots of people agreeing with you here. Joan is saying it's the footballer's right to refuse to wear a shirt. He doesn't have to give any reasons for making his choice. Margaret, again, says, keep politics and the like out of sport. End of story. Lots of you are saying those kind of things. Keith, though, says, do I have the right to believe in the Bible and its teachings anymore? Carol says, why in this day and age do people have to come out and celebrate it? Surely life has moved on by that. Why does everyone... Yeah, again, that's coming through. People are saying that they don't understand the need anymore for people to come out and declare their sexuality. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on all of that. gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at gbnews. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have some more of your thoughts. And also, I want to talk to you about Iceland at the supermarket, not the place. It's going to give discounts to the over 60s to help them with the cost of living. What do you think to this? Is this a great idea? Are you under 60 and saying, hang on a second, what about me? Do you think we're going to see more businesses doing this? Or do you think, hang on a second, this seems to me like a little bit of just marketing? I'll have that coming up in a couple of minutes. Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. Just a reminder as to who is keeping me company tonight. Journalist and broadcaster Nabila Ramdani, Alistair Donald, the Associate Director at the Academy of Ideas and former advisor to Boris Johnson and now Conservative life peer Lord Moylan. And I got an email in from Suzanne. Michelle, we love you and your show, but we get really excited when you've got Daniel on. We love him. He's so cool. Please, can he be on more often? That's from Suzanne and Paul from the Forest of Dean.
Kind. Thank you.
Yes, little fan club growing here for you, Lord Moylan. You know, you can take them all in for a cup of tea in the House of Lords, show them around, couldn't you?
Yeah, at a fan club of 2, that can just about accommodate.
Yeah, fan club of 2. I'm sure there's plenty, but they're all a bit shy to let you know their thoughts. Right, the supermarket Iceland says it's to offer a 10% crisis discount to the over 60s to help them with the cost of living. Other supermarkets such as Tesco and Morrison's have already cut their prices. But celebrity chef Jamie Oliver has come under fire for launching a protest to get supermarkets to drop their buy one, get one free promotions, with people saying it's stopping a source of cheap food. Just showing you a little protest there on the screen. If you're listening, not watching, it's Jamie Oliver with what looks like a large trifle in his hand. It looks like he's doing bicep curls with it. Oh, it's eaten mess, I've just been told. There you go. That shows the level of my sophistication, doesn't it? I look at an eaten mess and think it's a trifle. Anyway, Alistair, where do you sit on all this?
Well, compared to Jamie Oliver's contribution to this debate, which is to scorn at the idea that cheap food should be available to anyone, then this Iceland initiative almost seems positive, it has to be said. And you know, in some ways, the recognition that this cost of living crisis is very, very serious and there's not very much been done about it is now starting to percolate through, and it comes through in initiatives like this. The problem, though, is that something like this is obviously so completely inadequate in terms of addressing what is a huge, huge problem. Businesses, yes, well, by all means offer discounts, but I think the thing that we really need from businesses is kind of some long-term planning about how it is that they're going to transform their businesses, offer proper jobs to people that need good employment with decent wages, and across the board for everyone start to reduce prices of goods, because inevitably the response to this has been, well, if pensioners are getting a discount, then why shouldn't single mothers or whoever else, whatever other group wants, rightly wants to have cheaper food, why don't they get it as well? And I think you can just see the sort of direction that this is headed in is a kind of squabble over who accesses the cheaper food, rather than a more positive and much needed debate about how we transform the economy more broadly.
Yeah, but let's not forget, we live in a society, don't we, where we can identify as anything that we want these days, apparently. So if you're looking at that story thinking they're over 60s, I wonder how you'd get on if you went to an Iceland and identified as an over 60-year-old and tried to get your discount. I wonder how that would wash in this day and age. Anyway, Daniel, where do you sit on it all? 10% off for the over 60s?
Well, I don't think it's very well targeted, as Alistair says, if it's meant to help the poor. There are lots of people over 60 who aren't poor. The fact is that we don't need a strategy for this, because supermarkets and other businesses are actually very good at trying to adjust their prices to maximise sales. And we will see a lot of this. We will see some prices of things going up. We will see other goods coming in that substitute for them that might be cheaper. People will shift what they're buying to some extent, so that they're not buying a particular type of meat, but a different type of meat. Vegetables and so on might be more seasonal, and things that come in at different times. And I think this will happen through the ordinary... We don't need a government telling people what to do about this. If they want to give discounts, they want to give money off, they do that already. You get money off if you go to a certain supermarket and you get a loyalty card and your points build up and so on. They have all sorts of means of trying to encourage people to buy at their shops, and they're going to be competing to try and do that. So I'm not too worried about that. I'm much more worried about the government having got itself into a total mess over its healthy food initiatives, which it says are there to address obesity, but really don't address obesity. All the recent measures, the ones that they're saying they're delaying, and Jamie Oliver's got into an eaten mess about,
I see what you did there. Did there.
All those measures, even the government has calculated that if they were applied, they would save nationally for each person 3 calories a day. Now, let me just tell you, Michelle, 3 calories a day isn't even half a gram of butter. It's the sort of thing you can put in your sandwich without even noticing. So it's not about obesity. It's actually about people trying to make you eat what they call healthy food, which means food like they eat. And frankly, I don't think this is the right time to be doing this. And Jamie Oliver should take his eaten mess and gobble it up.
Gobble it up. Nabila, where do you stand?
Well, first of all, on the Iceland initiative, I think it's a fantastic initiative, and others should follow suit. Every little helps. The elderly are amongst the most vulnerable members of society, and often they have given, a lifetime of service to their communities, indeed to their countries often, and they should get the most financial support possible. And also earning power is the highest among those who are much younger than 60 years old. And Age UK research shows that 3/4 of older people are worried about the rapidly rising cost of living. So I think it's it's fit that people, all the people, should be honoured and respected, and we should extend as much financial support as possible to them. On the buy one, get one free initiatives, I mean, I went to buy a notebook today from a stationery shop, and I was offered straight away a chocolate bar and a bag of crisps. So I do see that how it encourages...
I know the shop you're referring to. I won't name it, but that's been quite a long-standing strategy. I know exactly where you mean. Colin says, Michelle, we're over 60, but we won't get Iceland's discounts because my wife has not got a valid passport or a driving licence to prove her age. And neither will countless millions of other people, so it's a no-go. Hey, Colin, this is a radical idea. Why don't you go do the shopping? He says his wife ain't got the ID. Have you got the ID, Colin? If you have, there you go. You've got a job now from me to you this weekend. Let me know how you get on with it. Right, that's all we've got time for. Time flies, doesn't it, when you're having fun? Alistair, Nabila, Daniel, thank you very much for your time. Thank you all for all of your comments, all of your insight. Janet says she's going to have to take her passport or ID to the supermarket for the first time in a long time. Right. You have yourselves a fantastic weekend, and I will see you same time on Monday.